This video is an excerpt from our weekly podcast. Go and watch the full podcast, check the link in the description of this video, or support us on Patreon at patreon.com/prettygoodgaming. Ubisoft is making free-to-play games. Shock horror, Ubisoft is finally reaching its final form and has entered its cocoon stage and will just emerge into this AAA gaming publisher, which we all knew was going to happen. Like, how is this a shock to anyone? Free-to-play games is just a way to recurring monetization, this term that was coined years and years ago. It's surprising me how long it's taken them to realize that everyone else has done it. Like EA's done it, Activision's done it. I mean, Epic Games had led the way with Fortnite, but now they can make money indefinitely on a game. Oh my god, sign me up. This is certainly a reaction over there. I should jump into what the news is. Like, obviously we covered it in briefly.
I covered
week.
Part of it in the Daily Triple.
The news comes from an earnings call this week where Ubisoft announced a shift in focus towards more free-to-play games. Chief Executive Igamo stated the following: "It is now time to come up with high-quality free-to-play games across all our biggest franchises, across all platforms, but of course, it will take time." That led a lot of people to jump to conclusions that maybe, we won't be getting all the same games as we normally get. We won't get the early Assassin's Creed, or we don't get the Ghost Recon games and the Division games. But that was a misinterpretation, which they later clarified and come out and said, a spokesperson said, "Our intention is to deliver a diverse lineup of games that players will love across all platforms. We are excited to be investing more in free-to-play experiences. However, we want to clarify that this does not mean reducing our AAA offering. Our aim is to continue to deliver premium experiences to players such as Far Cry 6, Rainbow Six Quarantine, Riders Republic, and Skull and Bones, to name a few, while also expanding our free-to-play portfolio and strengthening our brands to reach even more players."
They always bring up Skull and Bones when they're like, our big plans for the future for 2018 to 2019 is going to be Skull and Bones, and then 2019 rolls and our plans for 2019 to 2020 is going to be Skull and Bones, and then yet again it wasn't mentioned. It had two mentions in the document that I read. Once was to say it's part of our expanding portfolio of new games, and then the second part was it's not coming until 2022 2023, and that was it, nothing else.
I mean, specifically on Skull and Bones, people are saying, well, this obviously they're delaying it this time just to make it this freemium game, whereas before they maybe would have charged for it. Now they're having to adapt it because of this new focus on free-to-play games. Not sure how much of that's true, whether there'll still be a price up front for the game, but we don't know yet.
I think the only thing we can say about Skull and Bones is we don't know anything about it. Everything we have seen, including some reasonable amount of gameplay, I think there's about 20 minutes of gameplay out there, but none of that's the case anymore because the game has been internally changed and rebooted a bunch of times, so we know literally nothing other than it's allegedly a pirate game and it's called Skull and Bones. Everything else is rumor or was once true but probably isn't.
So in context of what this means for the future of games, obviously they said our premium games will always be there, but we're getting additional games now, like extra. This is extra for you people. But if you've ever played a Ubisoft game or more recent Ubisoft games, you know that it's mainly about monetization, right? Pay for the game outright, and then there's additional content in there in terms of microtransaction, XP boosters, whatever trash they throw in. In a world where the lines are being blurred in monetization, premium games are usually you pay up front, you get the game. Not like that anymore, because freemium games are the free ones that you get to, there's no barrier to entry, but there's additional monetization in there. Ubisoft for so long of blurring these lines, you pay up front and there's extra monetization in there. People aren't happy with that, and it's shown in the recent games like Breakpoint was panned for monetization. We've talked about Assassin's Creed and how recently they've it makes me not want to buy these games from Ubisoft, because I know that I'm gonna have to pay it front and then I'm gonna have to pay extra for the best experience because they blow up the game or whatever. But that's just a few examples. Watch Dogs Legion was a recent game again. A premium game with freemium economy is just crammed in there. However, they've announced one of their first freemium games will have no barrier to entry in terms of price point, which is Tom Clancy's The Division Heartland. Don't know much about that. It's going to come in this next year or something. The Division Battle Royale, Henry. Fancy a game?
I mean, The Division looks pretty, but beyond that, doesn't do much else as far as I'm concerned. To be fair, the move into free-to-play, it makes sense from a business perspective, and they're saying that, the volume of traditional AAA games with, a price tag will stay the same. I don't believe that. They're going to stay somewhat, but they can't keep the same same momentum if they're also doing a bunch of free-to-play games. You just don't have that many resources. You've got the same amount of resources, and then you're adding more projects to come from those resources. So that's never going to work.
Well, on that point though, I just want to like venture this possibility, because I know maybe they'll do this, maybe they won't. But they've got a finite amount of resources in terms of manpower to work on games. Maybe they staff up, they get extra studios to work on these extra freemium games. However, the premium games, which they currently kind of operate as a live service game, although you pay for them and then there's a service afterwards, maybe they just produce a regular single player game without the live service, and then additionally they do the live service freemium games, which would mean that you don't have to develop the single player or the standalone games as much, so it'll free up some resources. So that means you don't have to put microtransactions in the original games, and then it's a win-win for everyone. You get a game that you pay for, no additional monetization, perfect. I'm a positive thinker. I like to think that good outcomes are possible, even though this is Ubisoft, even though this is the gaming industry, and even though they probably never do this because they're leaving money on the table. But one can dream, right?
It's a very pretty dream, but I don't believe that either of us are naive enough to believe that it will manifest into reality.
Damn it.
I mean, there is a chance. There is a chance, because EA, who are perhaps the biggest of the baddies in the games industry, they managed to do it with Jedi Fallen Order. They said no microtransactions, and it stayed no microtransactions. That game is out now, and it's the exact same thing as it was when it launched. There's been no extra stuff. Well, there's been like a challenge mode added, and that was all for free. These companies can do it. It is possible to break the cycle of needless monetization every time. I just don't believe it's going
to. Don't see it's going to happen.
Well, I mean, I'd love it too, but I've been burned too many times.
It is wishful thinking, that's for sure. But it would ease the strain of reviews. That's a bad way to term it, but Breakpoint, for example, was panned because of how they're trying to like make it a live service game. All the loot, which doesn't mean anything. It's just like different, a few different numbers, and like just you just pick up so many different. It's like a multiplayer game in a single player kind of shell, and it's like it's trying to force that monetization in so they can make the most money off this game, which is what detracted ultimately from critics and reviewers' enjoyment of it. And I know it's probably a vain hope, but hopefully this will allow them to still monetize games to the max, which is the freemium ones, but allow them to just focus a little bit more on the mechanics of the single player games,
hopefully,
without having to flesh it out with all that bullshit games as a service.
Or at least make like an Assassin's Creed game that's not just bloated to shit. You can keep all of your generic shit, just chop out like 10 hours of the fluff that's there for no reason and get rid of the XP boosters. It should be fine. The question of would you play one of these Ubisoft games if it was a free-to-play one? I mean, even then, probably not, if I'm honest, for most of them anyway. I'd play an Assassin's Creed because I quite like the series, or at least I have done back in the day. The Division does nothing for me. So if it was free, I just know it's not my kind of game. It's a grindy, multiplayer, loot-based thing, and none of those words tick any boxes for me. And if it's free-to-play, it's just going to be even more grindy because that's just how they work.
No, that's true. There's an important distinction to make here. I mean, from my experience playing The Division, I didn't have that much fun playing it single player. However, when I jumped on with some players on the Discord, we had actually a decent time. The problem was that was like a free weekend or something, and then when the paywall clicked back in, it's like, I don't really want to pay for this game. I would probably play it more often with the Discord members if it was free, however, because the point of it then is you're having fun with your mates. You don't have to spend anything on it.
I suppose I'll never say never. I'd perhaps play it for a little bit, especially like you say in a co-op multiplayer setting with friends, like people you know. Multiplayer games never hold me, and they're just not my games. I have no qualms about saying that it's not for me. So like I'd play for a little bit, but I would still stop after like maybe a couple of games if it was even that fun in the first place. Like even if it's the most fun multiplayer game, it just doesn't grip me because what am I doing? Like, why am I playing? Am I playing just to play? Because playing with your friends is all well and good, but I like to have something to strive towards, and a lot of multiplayer games, the something is like a new unlock, like a level up, or a skin, or a gun, or something, but that's not anything for me. Multiplayer and story games, I do believe there is a world where they can coexist and combine real nicely. I'm just yet to see it properly manifest in a way that works for me anyway.
Yeah, and hopefully...
And I don't hate multiplayer games, I just can't stick with them for a long time. That's what I'm trying to say.
The classic classical Ubisoft formula of generating game is just use all the ideas in your repertoire, all the technology, all the gameplay features, and throw them all in the one game, no matter whether it's Assassin's Creed game or a Division game or whatever. Just throw all the ideas you've got in one game. However, hopefully what this is indicative of, or this will allow them to do, is just separate. Like, single player game doesn't have to have a multiplayer part of it. And so if you want a single player experience, you can have that core experience and don't have to worry about, like, you know, additional monetization or multiplayer. And that's one thing I hate about Ubisoft games, is like the forced multiplayer. I'm playing Watch Dogs or whatever. Oh, someone has joined your session, has just whizzed past you on a motorbike. Are you going to chase them? Or it's like, fuck off out my game. I'm playing a single player game here. Fuck off my computer. How are you in my computer now? Fuck off. That's always my reaction. And again, wishful thinking. I hope they cut that shit out. Multiplayer game is a multiplayer game. A single player game is a fucking single player game.
Ubisoft does have good parts of games and some like half good games, but then it's undercut by some other bullshit. So there is potential there. It's not like they've always been awful. The fundamentals are there. In fact, the fundamentals are in virtually every single one of their games, because it's like, oh, you like your drone in Ghost Recon? We're now going to put a drone in Assassin's Creed and it's going to handle exactly the same way. Although, one thing I still don't understand is the unique selling point of Assassin's Creed used to be partially stealth, but that's gone out the window. One of the only things it does that no one other game really does is the climbing and the sort of free running stuff. Why haven't they taken that and put the Division with the free climbing mechanics? Because it's perfect for stealth.
Henry.
That's
Don't
why
give
it's
him
there.
ideas.
Assassin's Creed was cool because you could climb anywhere. You could like scope your target from rooftops. They had no idea where you are. But why can't you just do that again now? I mean, I know the answer. It's because you can just monetize it without doing that and make even more money. There's a bit of my brain where, like, oh, for this new Star Wars game that Massive are working on, give me, like, I can climb up a building and then I've got my blaster and I'm gonna shoot an Imperial or something. I just want it. I want it to be good. I want Ubisoft to be good, but I do not believe for a moment that it's going to happen.
I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm ever hopeful that these companies will maybe put something good. I don't know. I'm feeling positive about it. I'm stupid. I realise that. You can shoot me down, shoot my arguments down. I'm just hopeful. I like to see the best in people, and let's just hope. This is a change. We don't know what's going to happen. Maybe they will.
It's just every time I give them a chance, I'm just let down again. A
lot of people love Ubisoft and Ubisoft games.
They do, evidently.
So, I mean,
Valhalla's still in the charts.
This can't be bad news for everyone. Lowering the price to entry will impact a lot of people. For the people who can't afford the $60 plus entry point these days to play with their friends and this and that. Like, free-to-play games are a valuable resource, because free-to-play games can be done well. Like, look at Warframe, for example, is always held up as the gold standard and has been for years. Monetization can be done right. Whether Ubisoft do it right or not, probably doubtful. However, there are a place for these games now, and I think games like Warframe have proved that.
I think going free-to-play in addition to the AAA stuff is a good move, because if there's any company out there which has so many AAA games that they can afford to cut out 1 or 2 a year, it's bloody Ubisoft. They can take down their output just a smidge and then replace it with some free-to-play stuff, because realistically they're going to release a bunch of them. I imagine, like, back to back, bang out loads of free-to-play stuff all at once, and then some of them will get picked up, some of them will just fall flat, and then they're just going to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And like, oh, there's Division Heartland, it launches, maybe people don't like it, all right, scrap that, we'll do the Ghost Recon version, oh, maybe people like that one a little bit more, so they'll keep on with that one. It's a reasonable strategy. I can see it working for them, certainly as a money-making scheme. Whether or not those games are good, that remains to be seen, and whether or not I will play them, because I generally don't like Ubisoft games, remains to be seen. I want to be hopeful. I want to want things to be better.
At the very least, this is good news for some people, right? And it might not be me, it may not be you, but there's people out there thinking, yes, maybe I get to play Assassin's Creed this year.
Absolutely.
I couldn't afford it. Like, maybe I get to play an Assassin's Creed game this year, or the
Especially
Division.
as games are going up in price, especially on PlayStation, they're going to be like 70 quid or something.
So there you have it. These are our thoughts on the Ubisoft thing. It's an interesting discussion. Wait and see. Basically, like everything else, we'll wait and see how they implement it, but we don't hold out a lot of hope. There's something inside me that says maybe they'll do the right thing, and I'll probably eat those words at some point in the future. But
there's a bigger thing inside of me saying they'll definitely do the wrong thing.
There you have it. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to go and watch the full podcast, head to the description of this video and you'll find a link to our new podcast channel, or head over to patreon.com/prettygoodgaming and get early access.